because they were only inputting third-person knowledge. They were forgetting about all those other pieces. So if I say to you, my auntie came over to visit last week, you would know that all of my auntie came over to visit. Not just her head and not just her leg. When I say auntie, it's this whole thing, but you know what the computer feeds back? It goes, oh, the head was in Melbourne and the arm was at your place. And the computer will do that because unless you've punched in that information, it doesn't know. It can't output that information unless you go, auntie means everything, not just the head, not just the leg. So they never succeeded. And that was a heavy-duty government-funded program. It lasted for about 5 years. Just failed. And if you want to know something else that failed, making a little robot that could actually go from this end of the room to the other along these mats, that failed for a long time. Yes, they did make one. It took 6 hours. And you know what was in the middle of the room? A little box, this big, just a little box. It took ages for that robot to compute how to get around that box when it was placed in its programmed path. The robot was programmed to go there. They put the box there and it's like, big glitch. So you can see, the nervous system that we have inside us is absolutely phenomenal. Incredible. And it's not a computer. It's a handy metaphor, but it's not a computer. Doesn't function anything like a computer. Please, lie on your back. Okay, whew, that's off my chest.
Spitting out 42.
I like that. That's a nice movie. Number 5 is alive. Now, if you're comfortable lying with your legs long, lie with your legs long. If you need to bend your legs, bend your legs. Raise your right arm towards the ceiling, please. And now, listen to this next intention very carefully. Place the palm of your hand on the floor somewhere between your right shoulder and your head so that the elbow is pointing to the ceiling. Place your palm on the floor somewhere between your right shoulder and your head so that your elbow is pointing towards the ceiling, the right shoulder. That's the other shoulder, the right one. That's the left. That's it. Yeah. Now, make yourself as comfortable as you can. How do you go about doing that? Yep, there it is. Yeah, you're getting there. That's good. Yeah, some people will actually put padding underneath their hand so that the hand can actually land on something. That is called getting yourself comfortable. Some people have tried lifting their left hip a little bit to the floor, rolling their pelvis a little bit to one side. Try that. How can you fully claim the support of the floor through the palm of that right hand? place your left hand on the tip of your right elbow and see if you can use the left arm to help a little bit. Now, if you have difficulties with your right shoulder, then you have a couple of choices. You can imagine it all. You can simulate, or you can assist the simulation by sitting up and looking at others, because some scientists have proposed that we have mirror neurons, and by looking at somebody, you're actually stimulating a simulation inside yourself. Or a third choice, you can just simply decide to not do it and do something more interesting, whatever that happens to be for yourself. That is a choice. And then there's a fourth choice. You could decide to do it on the other side, the arm that does not trouble you. Keep on making yourself more and more and more comfortable. And maybe it's got something to do with the direction your fingers are pointing in. Are you aware of the direction in which your fingers are pointing? Are they pointing towards your head? Away from your head? Away from the feet? Towards the feet? Is there some direction that the fingers can point that would lead you to experience more comfort? And that word itself is a little bit of a tricky word, because for some of you, the sheer unfamiliarity of this position of the hand could be uncomfortable. Unfamiliar for some people means not comfortable, uneasy. And that is not a physical discomfort. In other words, it's not a discomfort created by the position of joints. It is a mental, emotional discomfort. The unknown makes me feel uneasy. Please stop, let that be. And raise your left arm towards the ceiling. And let's go about this in just a slightly different way. So have the palm of your hand facing the ceiling. And now think that your fingers have weight. And they do. I mean, they do have weight. But think of the blood flowing into the fingers, all that fluid in there. Think of that weight of the tips of your fingers starting to take your fingertips towards the floor, and just let the fingertips get heavier and heavier until the palm starts to turn because the fingertips are so heavy, and then let the fingertips continue to lead you until the palm of your hand lands on the floor. And if you'd like to repeat that process several times, please do. So think, or probably more accurately, sensitively feel your way into the sensations of the fingers. The fingers have a weight. Let them have their weight. Let the weight of the fingertips guide your hand towards the floor so that the weight of the fingers is always leading you, always leading you, always leading you. And then land your hand on the floor between your shoulder blade and your head. And now continue to make yourself more comfortable. And some of you just land your hand there and you're comfortable already. So is there comfort beyond comfort? Or maybe if I say it a different way, can comfort be more lingering so that you don't get uncomfortable quickly? So remember, you can bend the leg, you can roll the pelvis, you can adjust the floor, you can actually put things on the floor to bring the floor up higher, closer to you. And exercise your choice. You can use that right hand. And sometimes using that right hand just adds a little bit more weight, and that little bit of extra weight gives you a clearer sense of how your arm is organized. And then there's something else that that hand on the elbow can do. It can move the elbow, which does what? It stops you from having to use the muscles to move that arm. Suddenly the right arm is supplying the power, and you can reduce the amount of muscular contraction through that left arm, which then enables you to find another option that you couldn't get to if you're using just the muscles of that left arm. That's what happens in functional integration. You borrow the muscles of the person who's doing the FI with you, and they move you, and you get to listen. Make yourself as comfortable as you can. If you need to lift both, if you need to bend both legs, bend both legs. Remember, what direction are the fingers pointing? Does that make a difference? Okay, please stop, pause for a little while. When you were lying on your front and you put the palm of your hand into that push-ups position, you created that little gap with your arm, remember? When you're lying on your back like this and you put the palm of your hand on the floor somewhere near your head, you also create a little gap. There's a little gap. It's a different shape, but it's still a gap. Place your hand on the floor somewhere between your right shoulder and your head. And now, start to form in your mind the intent to take the back of your head into that gap that you've just created with your arm and the floor. Think of taking the back of the head. That's the part of the head that starts lying on the floor when you've got your nose towards the ceiling. That's the back of your head. Take the back of your head into that gap. Yeah, and to do that, you will need to turn your head. But you'll need to do something else. Bend your right leg, stand your foot, have your left leg long, and see if that right leg affords you something. It's the right arm. And do you have problem with your right arm? No, it's the right arm. That's all right. Okay, just making sure. That's okay. So it's an oversight. Okay, that's all right. No problem. Yeah. So as soon as that right leg is bent, does that offer you an opportunity that was not there when the leg was straight? After lunch, we'll watch a video that talks about the space of possibility. And of course, when your leg is straight, the space of possibility is very different. But as soon as you bend your leg, that whole space of possibility changes and you go, oh, wait a minute, I can do something with this leg. As you think of taking your head through the gap, would it help to roll yourself a little bit to the left? That means your right hip, the front of your right hip joint, will come higher from the floor. The more you take the back of your head into the gap, the higher the right hip joint will get from the floor. Now, this is not an invitation to do a roll. Please don't think of it. You can, if you wish to. If you wish to take it into a roll, that's absolutely fine. And if you enjoy it, that's even better. But the intention here is not to go into a roll. The intention is to get the head, the back of the head in particular, more and more through that gap. So much so that some of you will be able to see your left wrist, your right wrist with your eyes. Yeah, some of you will be able to look at your wrist with your eyes. There's quite a few, actually. And remember, just because I said it doesn't mean you have to do it. It's a possibility, but if you have to force yourself, better not to do it. As you take your head through the gap, push out your lower abdomen. Push it out. Does that help? Great. Please pause. I got to tell you, it's really nice walking through the room, looking at the way you're working with yourselves. It's fantastic. And in this style of ATM, because there are different styles in ATM, in this style of ATM, the way you're working your way through it, beautiful. Please now explore the same intent, but on the other side. Just before you had your right palm on the floor, now have your left palm on the floor. And pay particular attention to how you arrive there. How do you arrive in the new configuration? Because that really is a journey. You're going from one configuration or one posture into another posture. And I can't tell you. There are umpteen possibilities for how to get there. If you were to try to calculate the number of options open to you to get to that place, well, that would be a big calculation. It would be a big number. So choose the combination that suits you best, that leaves you feeling comfortable, that feels light, that feels easy. That, we've been doing this, that is aesthetically pleasing to you. Even in this first little movement of putting the hand there, you can already generate a way of getting there that is aesthetically pleasing. And then start to direct the back of the head into the gap and leave the palm on the floor. If you find your palm lifting off the floor, you might need to put something underneath your hand for the moment. Because if it's just the fingers pushing the floor, that will be a strain. It'll be a strain on the muscles that span across the joints of the fingers. That's why the palm, the heel of the palm is like the heel of the foot. Those bones can distribute force into the ground. If you need to have your right hand on your left elbow, by all means do that. That's it. And a lot of you have bent the left leg, your right leg's long. So try something else. If you already have bent your left leg, as you take the back of your head through that gap, slide your right foot along the floor, letting the thigh hang towards the floor. See if that helps. Bend the right leg, slide the right foot along the floor. And that a little bit of extra weight to the right might help you to get the head underneath the gap easier. Yeah, so there's the, come back. So there's the weight of the fingers. Just let them have, there's the weight, 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 there's the weight. There they are. Good. Please leave that. Pause. One more variation before lunch. Please place both of your hands on the floor to either side of your head, just like you've been doing, but now with both hands. Notice the choice that you make regarding your legs. Yep, place both of your hands on the floor on either side of your head. Make yourself comfortable. If you need to arch your back to do that, arch your back. If you need to change the position of your legs, change the position of your legs. If you need to change the direction that your fingers are pointing in, change the direction your fingers are pointing in. Whatever it takes to make yourself comfortable. If you need to put something under both hands, arrange it so that you can have something under both hands. If you need to lift your pelvis, lift your pelvis. Preferably with your legs bent. Now, turn your head and begin to take the back of your head into the gap created by your right arm, and then come back. And then turn your head and begin to take the back of your head into the gap of your left arm and come back. And continue to do that. Right, return, middle, return. Gradually making it a little bigger, as your comprehension of what happens through you expands. So let this be an inquiry more than anything else. What do you do with yourself to take the head through the gap on the right and through the gap on the left? And the answer could come back, I make a big effort. That's good. That means you know something. You know you make a big effort. Now, could you make less of an effort? And then you find out, oh, I can make less of an effort. Good. Can you make even less of an effort? How do you do that? How do you make it less of an effort? Now, here comes a constraint. Bend both of your legs, leave your knees pointing to the ceiling at all times. You knew it was coming, didn't you? Leave your knees pointing to the ceiling. You can have your legs as close together or as far apart as you want, that's up to you, but leave your legs pointing to the ceiling. And here is where you can exercise a lot of choice. If you find just going to the right is understandable and you like that direction, there's no need for you to go to the left for the moment. Just keep your left arm in that position. That's all right. So this is where your inquiry totally becomes your inquiry. So there's something about having those legs bent that is useful. Can you find the utility in that? I try not to use that way of thinking, but sometimes it just works. Having the legs bent affords you something. It lets you do something that is not possible when the legs are straight. And for this part of the lesson, if you do need to lift your pelvis a little bit, feel free to do that. But gradually you can leave your pelvis more and more on the floor and just lift one hip and then lift the other hip and so on. Okay, let that be, please. Roll onto your front. Put both of your arms in that push-ups configuration and make sure that the elbows can go to the floor. And now do the same thing that you did on the floor, but now with the front of your head. Take the front of your head through the gap to the left, and then the front of your head through the gap on the right. So a moment ago, you were taking the back of your head through the gap. Now you're taking the front of your head through the gap. And the front of your head is called your face. Would you agree, sir? Thank you. And there might be a very particular trajectory for the front of the head to go through that gap that allows the back to be supple. It might not be a direct path. It could go a little bit forward, then tuck in a little bit, and go skirt a little bit around to the other side. And it might not be a direct path at all. You might need to zigzag a little bit. So if you're paying attention to the back of yourself and looking for ease, looking for comfort, the pathway of the head becomes very different. So these two movements, these two different movements that you're doing are analogous to each other. Taking your head through the gap on the tummy, taking your head through the gap on the back, they're analogous. Please stop in the middle, lift your pelvis from the floor and walk your hands towards your knees until you're standing on your hands and your knees. And then come up to standing. Tuck your toes if you want. Bring one leg forward if you want. However you want to come up to standing, come up to standing. And then look around you to the left, look around you to the right. And then walk a little bit and notice as you're walking how constant in space is your head. And this is where you need to use your eyes as well as your sort of balance organs inside your head. As you walk, does your head sway left and right? Does your head bob up and down? Or is it like your head is just moving through space in one line and everything else just moves underneath it? And when you watch the best long-distance runners at the Olympics, when you watch them who can run for long, long distances, you'll see it's like their head is just being carried through space and the rest of them just moves underneath. And that way they don't waste energy. So now you can go and recoup a little bit of energy and have lunch. Have we got FIs today? Have we got FIs? Okay, so it's a 1 1/4 hour lunch.